Starts and sits for Fantasy Week 14. Welcome, everybody, to Fantasy Football Today, presented by BetMGM, the sportsbook born in Vegas. Adam Azer, Jamey Eisenberg, Heath Cummings. Okay, we're excited for tonight's game. We're excited to talk about today's slate. There's not a ton of pure AFC home games, so we've got some AFC teams at NFC teams. Today we're talking Cleveland, Pittsburgh, Chargers, Chiefs, Jaguars, Titans, Jets, Dolphins, Raiders, Bucks, Bills, Rams, Bengals, Cowboys. But I have a trivia question for you fine gentlemen. Jakobi Meyers, and I think you're going to get this, by the way. Jakobi Meyers is second on the Raiders in green zone targets inside the 10-yard line behind Brock Bowers. But he's tied for second. He only has 3. Jakobi Meyers has 3 green zone targets. He's tied for second. Who's he tied with?
Trey Tucker.
Green zone. So that's inside the 5, right?
10.
Inside the 10. I'm going to say that he is tied with Alexander Madison.
Hold on one second. Need to get this. There we go. He's tied with Devontae Adams for the second most green zone targets.
That doesn't count.
Dumb question.
Okay. Today on the show.
Wow, how's Deontay Johnson's numbers on the Panthers?
It's interesting, right? It's amazing that Jakobi Meyers is the
I
same.
hope we get more about what Amari Cooper has done with who do you play for the Browns?
Okay, off to a great start. We're going to tell you which team is leading the NFL.
That's what you led with today?
It was a joke. It was a fun little trivia question. Which team is leading the NFL
about Jeremy's fantasy cops again
in yards per game since week 8? Which team is giving up the most big pass plays in their last 3 games? Will Levis has thrown 7 touchdowns in his last 4 games, but what is weird about those 7 touchdowns? I'm going to tell you all that in the next hour. All right, players we love and players to avoid. And then I have a very important FAB note for everybody. Okay, very important. Stay tuned for that. But Jamey, who do we love this week?
Tua Tagovailoa is the start of the week. So I hope he takes advantage of the Jets defense that seems like it's going to be minus Sauce Gardner. So I don't know if that's a plus or a minus based on the year that he's been having. But clearly you'd like to not see that player on the other side of the ball. Tua is on fire in his last 3 games. You know, some of it's been a little fluky, like what we saw last week against the Packers, where he had, 29 fantasy points, with a lot of it coming in the second half in garbage time. But he's playing well. The numbers are what they are. And the Jets, I know a lot of the production that has come against them from the quarterback spot has been from running quarterbacks. But I think with the way Tua's playing right now, home game, big game for the Dolphins. If they still have any chance of staying in the playoffs, they have to win out. And I think the Jets are obviously a mess right now. So I know they did a good job against Geno last week. I think that's more about Geno. I don't think Tua will be slowed down to the point where he's not a top 10 quarterback this week, but I think he's going to be a top 5 quarterback. So love the setup for Tua in week 14.
Would you start Tua, who is the number 1 quarterback in fantasy over the last 3 games? Yes, he is in 6-point per pass and touchdown leagues. Tua or Baker Mayfield?
I have Tua ahead of Baker, but to me, Tua, Darnold, and Baker are almost interchangeable.
Oh, I look forward to doing what I do, playing devil's advocate on that Baker Mayfield take. I was a little surprised at how high you guys are on Baker Mayfield. That's coming up in one question for each game. Heath, who do you love this week?
Isaac Guerendo. Like fill in the blank 49ers starting running back. We've seen it for basically as long as Kyle Shanahan's been there. We saw Jordan Mason lead the league in rushing earlier this season. Guerendo's averaged 5.9 yards per carry whenever he's gotten an opportunity, scored a touchdown just last week. I think he is a top 12 running back this week and a top 12 running back rest of season.
Oh, you got to Azer stat that one, though. Take out the 76-yard run. What's he averaging yards per carry?
Like 4.2.
Okay.
But Azer loves guys who have 76-yard runs. It's the guys who have never had a 76-yard run that are the problem.
Takes Kareem Hunt 12 carries to get 76. Now, even more than that, 20 carries to get 76 yards. All right, Tua Tagovailoa, Isaac Guerendo, we love them. Who are we avoiding this week, Jamey?
I would like to avoid DK Metcalf. His history against the Cardinals is absolutely abysmal. He's not 100%, whether it's the shoulder injury or more recently, as we saw last week, the knee injury. And this Cardinals defense is very good this year. And they've been, again, just good against DK Metcalf over the course of really the majority of his career. But in the last 5 games, he only has 1 game with a touchdown. I believe it's only 1 game with double digits in PPR. 1 game maybe over 10.8 PPR points. So he's not been the DK Metcalf we know. He hasn't scored a touchdown in 3 straight games. His last 2 games has been miserable. I just don't think he's right. So he is a number 3 receiver still. So you're starting him in 3 receiver leagues, but he's not a top 24 receiver for me in this matchup.
Can you guys see this? My phone. Right, hold on.
There, but yeah.
I don't know. It is a picture. It's a screenshot of DK Metcalf with 4 to 5 yards of separation against a Cardinals cornerback 2 weeks ago, and Geno Smith about to throw a 35-ish yard touchdown pass to him, and he gets strip sacked just before he releases the ball. It's been and then last week, I mean, I talked about this extensively on Beyond the Box Score. Last week, he had DJ Reed destroyed him on a route on a double move, and Geno underthrew the ball, and it should have been a 34-yard touchdown instead of a 30-yard catch, holding him back. But Arizona really did a very good job, except for that one play on DK Metcalf, which ended up being a fumble recovery. All right, so Metcalf, you want to avoid. I know, but not going to be so easy, right? Was he in your top? Where is he? I'm sorry. Did you mention that?
He's like 34.
Oh, wow. Even with 6 teams on a bye. Wow. Okay. Heath, who are you avoiding?
The Chiefs running backs, if I can. Namely Isiah Pacheco, because it seems like even though Kareem Hunt played one more snap than Pacheco last week, I think we all have Pacheco ranked higher than Kareem Hunt. I'm just not sure that it's 1 week and then Pacheco becomes the 18-touch guy again. I still think this is going to be a committee. I still think it's very questionable if they have a rush attempt on the 1-yard line, who that's going to be. And they're facing a Chargers defense that has not given up very many fantasy points to running backs. Now, this is even more difficult, I think, than DK Metcalf, because there are not 24 running backs that I want to start. But I would definitely like to start Guerendo over him. I would start a lot of these guys that we've been like Rico, Dowdle, Tyrone Tracy, Rashad White, DeAndre Swift, like even Chuba Hubbard, who I don't like this week. I would start all those guys over anybody on the Chiefs running backs.
Okay, I have to change my one question for each game for that one. So it was going to be about Isiah Pacheco. Very good stuff there.
All right, do that for you. My one question for each game has been awesome.
Oh yeah, what would it be?
I'm kidding. It's probably why the shows went for an hour and 20 minutes, because it turned into 3 questions for each game, and then we reviewed the game.
Right, exactly. Okay, so start Tua, start Guerendo, sit Metcalf. Heath, I'm curious, where do you have DK Metcalf?
Like top 20. I was very encouraged. I think Jacob was tweeting about it too. His first read target share went way back up last week. He had 9 targets. He didn't score the fantasy points, but there's been opportunities there. I think the big boom's coming for DK.
Okay, and the other guy to sit was Isiah Pacheco. And Jamey, I'm curious, where do you have Pacheco?
He's in the top 24, but I agree with Heath. It's like there's about 17, 18 like really good running backs this week. And then there's about 3 or 4 guys that are just a little bit concerning. So I would start Pacheco over some of the guys Heath mentioned. Like I'd start him over Chuba Hubbard. I just have no interest in Chuba this week. I don't remember everybody else that he said, but that's one that stood out to me. But yes, it's not encouraging. I do think that we've seen teams have been able to run on the Chargers lately. And I wonder how much the Chiefs will commit to that. You know, you can't really look at the first game that these 2 teams played because so much happened in that game. And so much is different from that game. But I wonder if, Pacheco, did he shake the rust off and he's good to go? I did like the fact that he had the long run against the Raiders last week. So hopefully he's back, being 100%.
Yeah, the Chargers keep teams out of the end zone, but they do give up 4.6 yards per carry to running backs. All right, so here's what I want to talk about with FAB. And Heath mentioned Isaac Guerendo. I'm sorry, I wish I had talked about this more. I don't even know if I mentioned it at all on Tuesday's show. If you're going to spend a whole bunch of FAB on a player, make sure, and there's still time, there could be another big player that comes available in the playoffs. Please check the budgets of the other teams in your league. I get all the FAB reports in the FFT Open leagues, and obviously in the leagues that we're in. And I see teams spending $75 on Isiah Pacheco or on Isaac Guerendo when the second biggest budget was like $40. This is, these are not exact numbers, but you only need to spend $1 more than the next highest available budget. We
did mention it briefly Tuesday.
I thought so. I wish I had hammered it home though, because people went out and they got Pacheco, but they spent too much and now they have no FAB left. Sorry.
Those I names are killing you.
Yeah. With the O at the end. Yeah. I'm not good with vowels, but people went out and got Guerendo and they spent all their FAB and they didn't need to. So if this situation comes up again, and you have FAB left to go get the guy you want, don't spend it all unless you absolutely have to. Check the budgets of the rest of your league.
Great situation in the Scott Fish Bowl. There are 3 teams from my division that advanced, but the other 2 guys already spent all of their FAB. So I'm just making $1 ads as many players as I want.
Of course.
They can't get any of them.
That's great. All right. This holiday season, we've got some great gear for you. If you go to shop.cbssports.com/fantasy, perfect time to crown your fantasy football champion. Whether you're celebrating a championship or teasing the league's biggest loser, Fantasy Football Today's new fan shop, powered by ShopSense, has everything you need. From trophies to t-shirts, we've got the gear to make your league unforgettable. There's also great stuff if you have a fan cave or you just want some sports memorabilia. It doesn't have to necessarily be fantasy football related, but look at this stuff if you can't see it. We got a I Suck at Fantasy Football t-shirt. We've got a draft board. It's got some really great stuff on this website, shop.cbssports.com/fantasy. Get everything you need to make this season legendary. We're going to take a quick break. We got news and notes and one question for each game when we come back on Fantasy Football Today. Okay, welcome back. Trevor Lawrence is on IR, so probably done for the season. He could come back for the last game of the season, but Trevor Lawrence probably out for the year. Joe Burrow bought the Batmobile from The Dark Knight or The Dark Knight Rises. He bought the Tumbler. That's pretty cool.
Man, have I been there? Like something's not going right in your life and you just need to go find the distraction. Like you binge a TV show or just go like do something. Like Joe Burrow's like, man, football stinks right now. Let's go get the Batmobile.
Yeah, you know what he could have done? Bought a defense.
Probably. Do we know how much he paid for it?
$2.9 million.
That's kind of like less than I expected. That's a pretty cool purchase, I guess.
Is he going to drive it though, or is it just like going to be like something he shows in the garage?
I don't think you can go drive it around town, right?
Why not? You've seen. I mean, like, there's definitely been people that drive replicas of the old Batmobiles.
I was reading the article on CBSSports.com about it, and the article, I don't know if it's true or not, said it's not street legal. But
yeah, that's what I was coming on to say. It's not street legal.
Well, and it doesn't really seem right for him to have
stop Joe Burrow in Cincinnati. Like
when he dyed his hair, he looked more like a Batman villain than anything, and so it kind of feels like Batman's going to show up at his house and take it back.
Yeah, but wouldn't a Batman villain pay $3 million to buy the Batmobile? That's like very on brand.
Yes.
Drew Lock will start for the Giants this week. At running back, Alexander Mattison was limited. Breece Hall missed practice. And again, I was surprised at the rhetoric here. I mean, they're basically not saying that Breece Hall is definitely going to play, but it's kind of weird since he played last week and they turned optimistic. But right now, I still think you should roster Braylon Allen.
And you probably said this earlier in the week and I just missed it, but also in that Raiders situation, Sincere McCormick is on the active roster now. Like they had to make the move to either choose not to activate him from their practice squad again or to give him an active roster spot. So they've got 5 running backs on their active roster right now, but they wanted to make sure they kept him.
Okay. I would imagine that we may get a Zamir White to IR situation soon.
Yeah.
Which I don't know why it hasn't happened yet. I guess they're holding out hope. I actually like the setup a lot for Amir Abdullah if the current setup stays as it is.
Oh, okay. And so obviously the 49ers, they claimed Israel. Yes.
Okay.
But Patrick Taylor is on the active roster for the 49ers. Bucky Irving missed practice, which is not a surprise, but we'll keep an eye on that. You might want to keep Sean Tucker on your radar. And Roshan Johnson and DeAndre Swift missed practice. Are we taking this Bears situation seriously with both these guys missing practice? They're at San Francisco this week.
Not yet for Swift.
Right.
Roshan's in the concussion protocol, so I would anticipate, not having him this week at this point.
Swift could really get a boost if he's fine and Roshan's not.
That's true.
I actually like him this week.
Travis Homer, would that be the third guy for them?
I believe he's currently the third guy, yes.
Okay. All right, wide receiver news. Deontay Johnson suspended for 1 game because he would not go into the game on Sunday. And I was just curious, and I'm going too long on these news and notes, so I'll go faster after this. But I feel like they might cut him. They kind of talked like they didn't commit to keeping him. Should we be picking up Deontay Johnson in case he ends up in a spot where he actually could get some targets?
I would think at this point, with what's left in your fantasy leagues, if you want to try and get ahead of the, 5 other teams that are going to be in the playoffs, maybe, but it'd be very off-brand for them to do that, because I always kind of viewed this as not only did they want to see what they have potentially in Deontay Johnson, but they're so good at trying to get compensatory picks. Like, they would give that up if a team signs him, because, and Heath, you could, speak to this more from a dynasty perspective where he's at this point, but I still think he's going to be somewhat coveted. He's obviously not going to get a mega deal. He's not going to be one of the top, free agent wide receivers, but some team will still give him an opportunity to play. And that's, I think, part of Baltimore's MO is they love the compensatory picks.
Yeah. And man, how much has he hurt his stock enough yet to where they don't get a compensatory pick? I think would be the concern. Like his original team didn't want him. Then the Panthers basically just gave him up almost for free. And now the Ravens can't find a place to play him. But I agree with Jamey. It'd be really surprising if they cut him at this point.
All right, that's Deontay Johnson. Romeo Doubs is out tonight. Ladd McConkey was limited, which is a great sign. The Jaguars signed Josh Reynolds. Cedric Tillman missed practice, which is not a good sign. Hopefully he can get back out there. Calvin Austin, did he practice or did he miss? He must have missed practice.
Calvin Austin missed practice, yes.
Okay. But Jalen Coker practiced in full. Devontae Smith practiced in full. Keon Coleman was limited or listed as limited. DJ Moore and Keenan Allen missed practice. Well, that's probably just resting. And Alan Lazard is practicing for the Jets. He's eligible to come back now. Tight end, Dallas Goedert missed practice. We're not expecting him. Tight end, Josh Oliver for Minnesota. He practiced in full. Does he impact your TJ Hawkinson rankings, Josh Oliver?
Dropped him about 7 spots just because of Josh Oliver.
Well, I'm going to pretend like that thing that we saw over 2 games when TJ Hawkinson was making his return from an ACL was not real. It might be real again. Josh Oliver did impact TJ Hawkinson in his first couple of games back, but it's TJ Hawkinson and it's Josh Oliver.
Yeah. Okay. And it's more of a playing time thing because his playing time's gone up.
Are you trying to allude that Kevin O'Connell is the new Arthur Smith?
Dalton Kincaid was limited, and Jatavian Sanders is trending toward playing. On the offensive line, the Giants could be without both starting offensive tackles, and that's already without Andrew Thomas. Left tackle Taylor Decker's out for the Lions tonight. Peter Skoronski, left guard for the Titans, he missed practice. And Saints guard Cesar Ruiz missed practice with a concussion, so I think that means they could be without 2 guards in this game, but they'll get their center back, but they won't need them against the Giants. On defense, Sauce Gardner missed practice. Jair Alexander, cornerback for the Packers, he's out. Some kicker news. Evan McPherson for the Bengals, he's on IR. Cade York could replace him. And I talked about John Parker Romo, Jamie's #1 kicker on the waiver wire. Well, Will Reichard could be back for the Vikings this week. So keep an eye on that. You might just
you know what's a good move actually is you can pick him up now because he's still IR eligible. So if you have an IR spot, like I did this in a few leagues because clearly this has been a good kicking team. You can stash him on IR, and then depending on who your kicker is, or if you need to buy your play, like I did this one league last night where I had Fairbairn, so I just dropped Fairbairn for Reichard, and if I have to pick up somebody else, I'll do it. By the way, I did find it funny. You could tell the people that because I do a lot of my leagues on Wednesdays, waivers run on Wednesdays. The people who do their moves on Tuesdays, I saw about 5 leagues, and I probably do 15 of my leagues that run waivers on Wednesday. The people picking up McPherson.
Oh, yeah. That's a shame.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Okay, yeah. Just to finish up the defensive notes, cornerback Darius Slay for the Eagles, he practiced. Alex Highsmith, edge rusher for the Steelers, a great edge rusher. He's expected back this week. Azeez Shire's 3-game suspension was upheld, and the Giants could be without a starting cornerback, their middle linebacker, Bobby Okereke, and a defensive lineman in addition to Dexter Lawrence. I mean, the Giants are not just the worst team in the NFL, but maybe one of the most injured now as well.
If you Drew Lock was starting, right?
Yes, I did. If you haven't signed up for BetMGM yet, use the bonus code FANTASY, and you will get up to a $1,500 first bet offer on your first wager with BetMGM. So you download the BetMGM app, you sign up using the bonus code FANTASY, deposit at least $10 and place your first bet on any game, and you'll receive up to $1,500 in bonus bets if your bet loses. Just make sure that you use the bonus code FANTASY when you sign up. All right. Someone's saying that we got a lot of superhero talk since.
Oh, yes. I was going to, that was the one I was hoping you would put up. Very, very good points here.
Yeah. So Jamey would be Michael Keaton Batman. Heath would be Christian Bale Batman. Adam would be Ben Affleck. And Dave would be Adam West Batman.
So when I saw this, and thank you, Aaron, for contributing to the show, I just went and searched who was the worst Batman. And the first result that I found said Ben Affleck.
I would say Val Kilmer probably.
Who was the one that had the nipples? Remember?
Well, there was George Clooney.
Oh, Clooney was the worst Batman.
Yeah, I think Clooney may have been the nipple costume. That was pretty controversial.
Well, you were the guy that didn't wear a shirt on the show yesterday, so
that is true. Okay, one question for each game. Cleveland at Pittsburgh. Starter sit Najee Harris coming off that huge game.
I would start him. His worst game in his last 7 has been the Browns game. But you got to hope for 2 things here. You got to hope that what we saw in the passing game before the Browns game and after the Browns game, he had 5 targets, 4 catches in week 11 and 6 targets, 6 catches in week 13. But he did not have that much work in the Browns game. And from a passing perspective, was that the snow or was that by design? And then they've given up a lot of touchdowns. So when you look at it, I think if I have the number correctly, it's 9 touchdowns. It's 8 or 9 touchdowns when you factor in Taysom Hill. So the rushing touchdowns have been huge here. And they gave the rushing touchdown, or the rushing touchdown went to Jaylen Warren in that game against Cleveland. So can he score? He's got 4 touchdowns in the last 7 games. Can he be more involved in the passing game? Can he do both? If he does both, you're going to get a game like last week.
I kind of view Najee like I view Jameis. They were terrible the last time these 2 teams played, and they were so good the week after that I'm just viewing them as must-starts this week.
All right, Chargers are at the Chiefs. I was going to ask you about Pacheco, but how about DeAndre Hopkins? Starter sit DeAndre Hopkins.
13 PPR points each of his last 2 games. It's not a horrific matchup. It just depends, I think, what you have. So I think he's just safe to call a number 3 receiver.
The most number 3 wide receiver, yes.
So I know Heath would start Metcalf over Hopkins, but Jamey, how about you?
I would start Metcalf over Hopkins also, but they're all if they're not back-to-back, they're virtually close.
Jacksonville at Tennessee. How much faith do you have in the Titans passing game?
More than I ever have since Steve McNair.
I have Will Levis, I think, at QB 15. The projections, even with the great matchup, really don't like Calvin Ridley that much. And it's largely because he's not been very good lately. He only has 2 games all season with a touchdown, and he only has 1 game all season with more than 5 catches. But it's Jacksonville. It's a revenge game. I'm probably starting Ridley.
I'm starting Ridley also, and I do think this is an opportunity, if you're stuck, to go with Nick Westbrook-Ikine. 61 yards or more in 2 of his last 3, 7 touchdown, a game with a touchdown in 7 of his last 8 games. A touchdown in 7 of his last 8 games, 8 touchdowns over that span, 10 touchdowns on the season. I mean, look, there's 6 teams on a bye, so he's as good a streaming bye week option that you could find.
And what's the thing that Will Levis has done? I mentioned 7 touchdown passes in his last 4 games. So what hasn't he done? He has no touchdowns from closer than 15 yards in that stretch. He's one of 3 quarterbacks in the last 4 games who doesn't have a green zone touchdown pass. Kirk Cousins and Justin Herbert are the other 2. And that's just that's why it's just so difficult to trust, is that everything is so just all these deep balls. And that's the thing with Calvin Ridley. He was playing really well, but now he's not connecting on the deep balls. He had a step on a guy, could have had a big gain, but Will Levis made a kind of a poor throw. And that's going to happen when you're having a 20-yard ADOT. So that's just he's throwing touchdowns, Will Levis, but 7 touchdowns his last 4 games, and none of them have been close. They've all been 15 yards or longer, including
I also think you got to take into account he's not had easy matchups in those games. So that's the hope, is that he's not going to see a pass rush like he's seen the last few weeks. He's going to see a secondary that's bleeding big plays. So this lends itself to what he has been doing well. My biggest concern, and Heath mentioned his name about something we're going to talk about soon, is Tony Pollard. Like Tony Pollard's potential in this game is massive.
Yeah. I have a stat on Tony Pollard too. I'll just give it now. Basically, the thing we say about Ramondre Stevenson, we like Ramondre Stevenson when it's close, whatever. Tony Pollard is like that, but 5 times better. When they get blown out, he struggles. When they win or when it's close, Tony Pollard is just awesome. So you shouldn't ask if you should start Tony Pollard, right? Right, Heath, just start Tony Pollard.
I absolutely love Tony Pollard this week.
All right, we will probably save some time on that game in a little bit. Jets at Dolphins. Is Breece Hall a must-start running back? He scored 12.3 or fewer fantasy points in PPR in 4 of his last 5 games.
Ring the bell. Just ring, ask that question yourself, and then just ring the bell, because there's not enough good running backs to sit Breece Hall. Yes, if Breece Hall plays, he is a must-start running back this week. If he has another bad game and we get everybody back from bye, then maybe he's not a must-start running back next week. Oh, wait. They're facing Jacksonville next week. He's still going to be a must-start running back.
Las Vegas.
Where is he in terms of biggest busts?
There's so many.
Without injuries.
Yeah, I was actually thinking about that. I think off the top of my head, I thought Travis Etienne was the biggest non-injury bust. But Hall is probably up there.
I mean, when you factor in capital.
Tyreek is up there too. Yeah, I
would. Tyreek, you got to say injury, right?
Yeah, but even when Tua has been healthy lately, like Tyreek hasn't been.
He's definitely a bust. But
Tyreek's been worse with Tua than Breece Hall has been all season.
Probably. Is that You know that for sure, or that's just a guess?
Well, he was wide receiver 31 with Tua going into last week, and he did catch a pass that bounced off of Jonnu Smith, which helped. But Breece Hall is still a top 20 running back, right?
Probably. All right. Las Vegas at Tampa Bay. Why so confident in Baker Mayfield?
Why don't you tell us why you're not confident in Baker Mayfield?
Well, because Bucky Irving's killing him. In the last 3 games, the Buccaneers have 5 running back rushing touchdowns. That's the same amount that they had in their first 9 games of the season. Their pass rate has plummeted. Their pass rate inside the 5-yard line has plummeted. I used to joke Mike Evans is their goal line back. Bucky Irving and Rachaad White and Sean Tucker 2 weeks ago are their goal line back. I can't just say the matchup because the Giants and the Panthers were great matchups and he didn't come through. I know he played well against the Giants. It's simply the touchdowns, though. They have transformed into a running team. It's small sample. It's only the last 3 games, really. But that is hurting him. And he only has 1 good receiver.
This is the thing about touchdowns. The fact that they were only scoring passing touchdowns for the month before the last 3 weeks was not predictive of what was going to happen the next 3 weeks. So I'm not sure the fact that they're only scoring rushing touchdowns right now means they're only going to score rushing touchdowns moving forward.
Well, how about the fact that he's throwing, 31-ish times per game lately? He's not giving you those 40-plus pass attempt games anymore.
Yeah, I don't think he needs 40 attempts against the Raiders. I've got him projected for 32 pass attempts in this game.
And you guys have him top 7, right, Baker Mayfield?
Yeah, top 4 or 5, yeah.
I mean, you could still see a scenario where they put up 40 as a team, and everybody eats.
Let's go Baker Mayfield. Buffalo's at the Rams. How are we feeling about Khalil Shakir? Is he still, just like going to get you 12 PPR fantasy point guy, or do you think anything different? Is it just who he is every week, Khalil Shakir?
I'm throwing out last week. Still had 7 targets in the snow.
No, me too. Yeah.
Prior to that, he's been so consistent.
Right.
So the good games are probably 15 PPR points, unless he scores, then it's higher. The bad games are 11 or 12. So that's a good number 3 receiver. Especially 6 teams on a bye, it's hard to get away from him. So I wouldn't worry about too much against the Rams.
He's a lot higher in the projections than he is in my rankings. I've tried to pull back on him a little bit, but it's because, like you said it, Adam, he scores 12 fantasy points every week without a touchdown.
Yep.
He hasn't scored a touchdown since week 3. I think one's probably coming, especially since he plays with Josh Allen. So I think he could be a top 15 wide receiver, and it shouldn't really surprise anybody.
91 wide receivers have 35 or more targets. Khalil Shakir has the lowest ADOT among those 91 wide receivers, 3.9 yard ADOT. Last game is Cincinnati at Dallas. Starter sit Rico Dowdle.
Start.
I mean, almost a must start if Logan Wilson is not there. They are, Rankins also missed last two games, I think, with an illness. So who knows if he's able to return. Sheldon Rankins, one of their defensive linemen. But if Logan Wilson's out, like, that was abysmal. You saw 3 running backs have success. I think 3 guys scored 8 or more PPR points against them from the Steelers last week with Cordero Patterson, Jalen Warren, and Najee Harris. And Najee just did whatever he wanted to in that game. I mean, he was running free. He was 6 catches. Like, Rico Dowdle's coming off great game. First 100-yard game for the Cowboys since week 3 of 2023. There's a lot to like about where he's at, especially in what should be a high-scoring game.
What if Rankins and Wilson are both back?
Then just given the week, he's still a starter, but like he's borderline top 15 for me. I love the setup for Rico Dowdle if those guys don't play. Today's going to be a big day on the injury report for that game specifically. You got Jake Ferguson in the tight end situation to monitor there for the Cowboys. Obviously, CeeDee Lamb to see what's happening with him if he's going to practice. This is their first practice day because their game's Monday. And then for the Bengals, it's a lot of the defensive players if they're in or out.
Oh, this is a pretty funny line from Matt Walters. I've got a fever, and the only prescription is more Dowdle. That's not bad. Dowdle or Pollard?
Pollard.
Okay, I saw Dowdle or Garrett Wilson from the chat.
If Logan Wilson is out, it's easily Rico Dowdle for me. If Logan Wilson's in, it's close. I would probably go Garrett Wilson in PPR.
All right. Now it's time for the Workhorse to Watch segment brought to you by Microsoft Copilot Plus PCs, powered by Snapdragon, the fastest, most intelligent Windows PCs ever. In this segment, we'll identify a player whose battery just doesn't seem to run out, similar to Copilot Plus PCs. And Heath, we've already talked about Tony Pollard, but why don't you tell me, because we love him this week against Jacksonville, who you would start Tony Pollard over?
Almost everybody. He is a top 12 running back for me. He has been a true workhorse this season, averaging a career-high 16 rush attempts per game, also catching 3.1 passes per game. I think people might look at last week against Washington and see that he only had 12 touches and think, well, yeah, Tyjae Spears came back. Look what happens. Tyjae Spears played 14 snaps and touched the ball once. Tony Pollard was still a workhorse last week. They just didn't have a lot of play volume. They didn't have a lot of running back touches. I expect they will this week. They're actually a favorite against Jacksonville, who has been one of the worst teams at giving up fantasy points to essentially every position. Tony Pollard will be a workhorse. He will be a top 12 running back. You should start him.
That was the Workhorse to Watch segment brought to you by Microsoft Copilot Plus PCs. Whether you're multitasking like never before, working far from power outlets, or sketching your own ideas into existence, you can do it with the new Microsoft Copilot Plus PC powered by Snapdragon. Battery life varies by device and with usage and settings. First game is Cleveland at Pittsburgh. I said at the top of the show, which team is leading the NFL in yards per game since week 8? Why, that would be which team?
One of these two.
Which guess?
Steelers.
No, it's the Browns. Almost 400 yards per game in their last 5 games. However, they're terrible in the red zone or bad, I'll say, in the red zone, and terrible in goal-to-go conversion rate. So they're only 16th in points per game in that stretch, despite number 1 in yards per game.
But you say that, though. Last time these two teams played, didn't Nick Chubb have 2 goal line touchdowns?
He did, and yet they're still struggling. They're 25th in goal-to-go conversion rate.
Well, I mean, you're just looking at matchup, though, and he's intriguing because they give up a rushing touchdown every week.
The Steelers do?
They do. It's 7 weeks in a row that a running back scored against them.
Is it going to be Nick Chubb, or is he going to get benched for a quarter again?
I just wonder, if it was like the last time when they played the Sunday going into the Thursday night game, right? They were caught. Kevin Stefanski said it. He goes, we were limiting Nick Chubb snaps. Did they do something similar, knowing that it was a Monday going into the following Sunday?
Right. They were limiting his snaps on a Sunday because they were playing on Thursday. Do they limit his snaps again because it's a short week of, previous week? So yeah, it's a running back has scored. This is insane to think about the Steelers defense. A running back has scored 17.5 or more PPR fantasy points against the Steelers in 8 of their last 9 games. And that includes Nick Chubb. But who did we talk about? Oh, Pacheco or Chubb?
Pacheco, but they're similar. Like there's three guys that I kind of view very similar this week. If the situation in Carolina holds like we saw last week, because if you're not getting passing downs work from Chuba Hubbard against the Eagles, he's basically worthless. So it's Hubbard, it's Pacheco, and it's Chubb. And the only reason to buy into Nick Chubb is because of this situation with the Steelers that they just give up touches. He's nothing if he doesn't score. Like throw out the receiving touchdown last week. You can't even count on that by any stretch. He's averaging your favorite stat, 3.0 yards, 3 yards per carry since he's come back from the knee injury. So he's not going to do anything on the ground. But if he's going to get 20 touches, if they're in contention in this game, like he'll have a chance to fall into the end zone again. 6 teams on a bye. It's not awful.
Yeah. All right. And Jerome Ford's the number 3 running back if you need him. Which quarterback do you like better in this game?
Jameis.
Does it bother you at all that the Steelers allow the fewest fantasy points to quarterbacks?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Okay, so where's Jameis in your rankings, Heath?
I believe he's right around QB 10. Would probably be a top 5 quarterback, honestly, if it wasn't for the fact that the Steelers have been so good against quarterbacks. I really am hopeful, and Jamey said it, like last game we got all those touches from Nick Chubb and we got the 2 goal line carries because it was a close game and neither team could really score. That wasn't a good weather game, right? This is supposed to be a good weather game. I'm hopeful that both these teams get up and down the field a little bit. It looks like that Denver game. I would start Jameis over Kyler Murray, over Patrick Mahomes, and over the 2 quarterbacks tonight.
Okay. Jamey, 2 quarterbacks tonight or Jameis?
I believe I have Love, Jameis, Goff, but I probably would play it safe with Goff depending on what my team looks like. But I think there's more upside with Jameis. I would start him over Kyler. I would start Mahomes over him though.
Yeah, you go Mahomes 7, Love 8, Winston 9, Goff 10. Heath goes Winston 8. I see him at 8. Maybe he's 10, but
yep, that's right.
Winston 8, Kyler 9, Mahomes 10, Goff 11, Love 12. All right, so we talked about the running backs. How about let's just get David Njoku out of the way. He's a must start.
Yep. Yes.
All right.
Even though he was bad against them last time too.
He was. But he has scored 17.1 or more points in 4 of his last 6 games, David Njoku. All right, how do we feel about the wide receivers for Cleveland, Heath, with and without Cedric Tillman?
I can't sit Jerry Jeudy. And I think that's the other thing is we talk about Jameis going up against the Steelers defense and the number 1 defense against quarterbacks. You know who the number 1 defense against quarterbacks was last week?
Yes, I do. Denver.
The Denver Broncos. So like if the Patrick Surtain matchup can't shut down Jerry Jeudy, I'm just going to start him as a top 12 wide receiver. He might fall to like 13 or 14 if Tillman plays. I'm viewing Elijah Moore as a very good number 3 without Tillman and a low-end number 3 with Tillman. And I would say Tillman, if he plays, is probably in that 26 to 28 area of the rankings.
Yeah, I just wonder, maybe Tillman doesn't play and this doesn't even matter, but I wonder what happens after these 2 huge games in a row for Jerry Jeudy, because with Winston on the field and Tillman on the field, Tillman had 1 more target than Jerry Jeudy from weeks 8 through 12. Everything changed once Tillman got hurt. But up until the point Tillman got hurt a couple of weeks ago, Jeudy had 2 catches on 2 targets with Tillman on the field. And then all of a sudden, bam, he just had a 31% target per route run rate after that. And then last week, obviously.
You said week 8 through 12, right?
Yeah, with the middle of week 12, yeah.
Okay, well, I was going to say week 8 through 12, Jerry Jeudy was wide receiver 8 per game with 17 fantasy points per game.
But Tillman was really good too, you know,
right.
Like we were, that's the thing. This isn't really a knock on Jeudy, but I'm just wondering if we're forgetting Tillman a little bit because he was super involved when he was there. So anyway, like how does it affect if Tillman plays? I know Judy's going to be the top ranked one, but where would Tillman and Moore be for you guys?
I think I answered, so I'll let Jamey.
Yeah.
Tillman would be 3rd. I would still have Moore 2nd.
All right.
He said it best yesterday. We got 3 career games for Cedric Tillman.
Yes.
Is that sustainable? It
Russell,
could be.
Okay, sorry. Russell Wilson, starter sit?
He's a low-end starter. You know, I think you start to look at from the Jameis group on down, of the rankings you just read, he's in that mix. And look, we're sitting here and saying Jameis Winston had a bad game in the snow. Well, Russell Wilson outscored him in the snow. Russell Wilson's coming off a 400-yard game. Russell Wilson's facing the better opponent. It's like there's probably more logic to saying Russell Wilson's in a better spot than Jameis Winston, except for the fact that volume is most likely going to favor Jameis. So that's, I think, where you sort of hang your hat on here. But look, Russ has played very well. He took advantage of a bad defense. Browns are still a little bit beat up defensively. You saw Myles Garrett limping through that game last week. If he doesn't play for whatever reason or has to leave that game, that's even better for the Steelers. So I think there's just not as much upside with Russ as there is with Jameis, but I wouldn't necessarily be making a panic move to drop somebody to pick up someone else and bench Russ. This is a game where you can still get 20 fantasy points.
And a question from the chat, Russ or Kyler Murray?
Russ.
You have Kyler, right?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, Russell Wilson. Not only did he throw for more yards or have a better game than Winston 2 weeks ago in the snow, he was 21 of 28 for 270 yards in that game. Like, that's really impressive. Only one touchdown.
I think that there was one number there that you said that is the problem, and it was 28.
Yeah, but that was a snow game.
Every game except for last week has been 28 to 30 pass attempts.
I think unless I wrote it down wrong, he threw 36 passes against Baltimore. Is that wrong?
Maybe he did. Maybe I was wrong about that.
No, I could be a typo on my end. That would be 2 of the last 3 games with 36 or more passes.
I did throw 36 for 205 yards, 0 touchdowns, and an interception.
Yeah, not a great game for him there. Cleveland's bad again. Cleveland's pass defense is terrible, and they give up a ton of big plays. So this could actually be a pretty high-scoring game. It'd be great. We talked about Najee Harris earlier. Jaylen Warren could get you those like 10-ish fantasy points like he usually does. Start George Pickens. That's it for Pittsburgh wide receivers, I assume. And then starter sit Pat Freiermuth. Anyone want to start Pat Freiermuth?
Not really.
He's not bad, given, again, the circumstances of the teams on a bye. Like, I like him better than Kyle Pitts this week. I think, when you're looking at what he's done the last 2 games, targets have been somewhat up. He had 4 for 59 against the Browns in the first meeting in the snow. Calvin Austin may not play, and so he's been sort of the middle of the field option for Russell Wilson when he decides to go there. So coming off the game that he just had and knowing that he's got a chance to be a playmaker here, yeah, he's not bad.
All right. And the Steelers DST, Dave has them 8th. Jamey and Heath have the Steelers DST top 3. Next up is the Chargers and the Chiefs. So before we do that, next up is a commercial break. We'll be right back on FFT. We're back. Chargers at Chiefs. And your stat of the game, this is another one I teased at the top of the show. The Chiefs have allowed the second most completions of 20 or more yards and the most completions of 20 or more air yards over the last 3 weeks. Some teams have had a bye and the Chiefs haven't, but they are struggling a bit against the pass. Which quarterback do you guys prefer in this game?
Mahomes, by a good margin right now, will be an absolutely significant margin if Ladd McConkey does not play.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I put this in the quarterback preview, but like Justin Herbert's QB 19 for the season, QB 22 for the last month. I don't want to start Justin Herbert.
He was hot. He scored 21.8 or more points in 4 straight games, and then 2 stinkers in a row against Baltimore and Atlanta,
Which are fantastic matchups.
Yeah, I think we might have to reevaluate Baltimore. They've been pretty good the last 3 weeks. For Atlanta, what happened against Atlanta? Well, he barely threw. He threw 8 passes in the second half. He threw 23 passes for the game. But fair enough. We're not going to start Justin Herbert.
I do think that there's 2 things that you're looking at here. This is now, like you like you said, you throw out last week's game because the Falcons' offense was terrible. The Chiefs' offense is obviously playing much better lately, so this has the potential to be a little bit more of a back and forth game. They can't run the ball right now.
Right.
That's fairly evident what we saw in just a 1-game sample size. And we know Gus Edwards has been mediocre at best this season. Kamani Vidal may or may not be an answer, but they didn't give him an opportunity to do so. So it's now on Herbert. And so you go back to that first game, Herbert was not running. So I think that was a byproduct of the foot injury that he had coming into the season. He threw at that point a season high 27 attempts. This could be a 40 attempt game for him. And he's probably going to have to run, which he has run for, I think it's like 29 yards or more in 4 of his last 5 or 3 of his last 4, something like that. Prior to the Falcons game. So his rushing numbers, I think, will matter here. And if you look at the Chiefs, they've given up some big games lately to some crappy quarterbacks. Gardner Minshew played well against them. O'Connell played well against them. Bryce Young played well against them. Bo Nix got a 20-point game in Kansas City. So there's a potential here for Justin Herbert to have a big game. I agree with Heath. Like his overall season has been disappointing. I think you almost got to break it up into 2 halves. It could be foot injury, not foot injury. It could be McConkey's development. There's a lot of things you can, sort of put into play. New offense coordinator, finally feeling comfortable. But I do think he is, with 6 teams on a bye, in the conversation to still be a starter.
Okay, I'll read some questions here. Herbert or Kyler Murray? I think you guys are going to go Kyler.
No, I would go Herbert.
Oh, okay.
If McConkey plays, I go Herbert. I don't like the matchup for Kyler at all. Seattle's defense played really well.
Herbert or Russell Wilson?
Again, with McConkey, Herbert, without Russ.
Yep.
All right, listen, if McConkey doesn't play, sit Herbert. But let's approach this game as if McConkey's going to play. You have him ranked, and he was limited in practice on Wednesday.
I think you approach it that way, but also, you got to be a little careful tonight with McConkey. I'd start Jaden Reed over him. I'd start Jamison Williams over him.
Okay, fair enough. And then you guys are going to start Baker Mayfield over Herbert. So let's move on. How about this question? Mooney or McConkey?
McConkey.
I am pretty sure that I have McConkey higher. That's a Sunday night game too, isn't it?
Yeah.
So hopefully we get a little bit more. Assuming that McConkey is cleared, I'll start McConkey. But they're close enough that if he's got a questionable tag going into that game Sunday night, it'll be Mooney.
I'm pretty fired up for this game, actually. This is a great week. I'm excited for some games this week. Okay, so McConkey's the only wide receiver that we're starting. Really, I mean, he's the only must-start wide receiver in this game, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And we already talked about Hopkins. He's a number 3 receiver. It's tough to trust Quentin Johnston right now. Will Dissly or Noah Gray?
I mean, if Dissly had a better game last week, you'd be saying Will Dissly or Travis Kelce. But yeah, Dissly over Gray.
I have Dissly over Gray, but I would prefer a couple of streamers. And really, Bowers was incredible against the Chiefs last week, but there's been some pretty bad tight ends against the Chiefs in the second half.
Yeah,
I'm sure it's a great matchup.
You wanted Dawson Knox. He had 4 for 40 on 6 targets. Jatavian Sanders was actually pretty good. He had 49 yards on 18% of the snaps.
Bowers' first game against the Chiefs, he had 5 for 58.
All right, so you guys like Mahomes. Jamey has Mahomes 7th. Heath has him 10th. He has the most pass attempts in football in the last 6 games. And if he would just stop missing guys wide open in the end zone, like Travis Kelce in week 10 and DeAndre Hopkins last week, he'd be unbelievable right now. So you guys like Mahomes. And we talked about Pacheco. He's a low-end number 2 starter. You might have to start him, but we don't love Pacheco. And Kelce, yes, and Hopkins maybe, and Xavier Worthy try to avoid if you can, right?
Yes.
Okay. DSTs, you like DSTs in this game?
Chiefs over Chargers, but I'd like to avoid both again unless McConkey's out.
Not a great week for DST. I would start the Saints over both.
Agree.
Not a great week at all, but I see the Jaguars and the Titans projected kind of high. Would you start those two? They're facing each other. They're our next game, actually. Would you start the Jags or Titans over the Chiefs?
The Chiefs, no. The Chargers, yes.
I wouldn't over either one.
Okay. Jacksonville is at Tennessee. And okay, I had one. I've basically gone through both of my stats of the game about Will Levis throwing a bunch of long touchdowns and about how good Tony Pollard is when he gets work and when they're in competitive games. And I'll tell you this, 6 straight running. I hope Heath didn't mention this. 6 straight lead running backs have averaged 5 yards per carry or better against Jacksonville. Woo!
I did not mention that.
Yes. Okay. If you're going to take a flyer on a quarterback in this game, which one's it going to be?
I mean, Levis by a mile.
Yeah, all right. I'm just asking. Levis or Herbert?
McConkey in, McConkey out.
Levis either way.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, I mean, it's such a good matchup here. So, who's the best wide receiver in this game?
Brian Thomas Jr.
Young Calvin Ridley is better than old Calvin Ridley. Yes.
That's Brian Thomas Jr. How do you feel about Travis Etienne and Tank Bigsby?
Oh boy. I would rather start Nick Chubb over both. I would rather start Pacheco over both. As much as I dislike Chuba Hubbard this week, I would start him over both.
So I've got ETN over the Chiefs, over Chubb, over Tank.
ETN, I think, has not scored a touchdown since week 2. And I don't remember the last time he's been over 50 total yards. Maybe once.
Last week.
Once in his last whatever games it's been.
It was a long time before.
Yeah.
The last time he did it was against the Colts. I don't even know when that was.
We're hoping for 50 total yards at this point.
Get hopefully 3 catches at him. Heath, are you expecting more than like 12 fantasy points for Travis Etienne?
Oh no, I just don't like. I said it's tough. I have 24 running backs projected for more than 10 fantasy points. And Travis Etienne's not one of them. It's just it only takes 8 to get into the top 30 at running back this week.
Jamey, actually, I'm going to come back to you. I have to look something up here before I ask this question. But how do you feel about Parker Washington coming off a huge game, 6 catches, 103 yards, and a touchdown on 12 targets? And he's not really playing in the slot anymore. He's kind of an out wide air yards guy now.
I think he's boom bust number 3 wide receiver. You don't want to chase one game, but it was the first game without Gabe Davis. They were coming off their bye week. So we had said this in the waiver wire conversation for 3 weeks, going into their bye week, coming out of their bye week. This was a guy to pick up, and he delivered. And so I can't see a scenario where they have success running the ball. I know the Commanders ran all over the Titans last week. The 3 weeks prior to that, they shut down Joe Mixon, Aaron Jones, and J.K. Dobbins. Those guys are all clearly better than Travis Etienne, and they don't have a running quarterback to threaten them like the Commanders did with Jane Daniels. So if they're going to be 40-plus pass attempts here for really 3 guys, he's got a chance. So I think when you're talking about, named wide receivers, like he's in the conversation, if you're willing to do this, over Jalen Waddle, over Deebo Samuel, over DeAndre Hopkins potentially. Like that's where Parker Washington is right now, off of one game, just given the role and given the matchup.
I would start all those guys over him, but he's
and I agree. But yeah. I'm just saying, like that's where he's. If you're considering benching guys, you're considering benching guys that have been struggling or not necessarily the most trustworthy.
Did you mention him with Nick Westbrook-Ikhine?
So again, I would, if I'm looking at those 2 guys, I'd play the matchups and I'd go with Nick Westbrook-Ikhine, but they're very similar. It's just you don't want to expect that many targets again, that much production again from a guy that's just never done it before. But if he does do it again, then we're talking about a very favorable schedule moving forward. So he should be rostered.
Okay. The reason why I didn't hear everything you said is I was looking at, you keep talking about how much you don't like Chuba Hubbard. He didn't have any targets last week. I just want to know if it changes your mind that he ran Chuba Hubbard ran 30 routes last week and Jonathan Brooks ran 6. He was on the field for almost every third down. So maybe it was just kind of a fluky game that he didn't get a target.
Yeah. It's also Philadelphia though. That's why I don't like him. That's just the role in the passing game is just a part of it.
Okay. All right. Evan Ingram is a top 7 tight end for you guys. Remember he came back from injury and he had 102 yards at Chicago. Since then, he's averaging 37.5 yards per game in his last 6 games. Are we sure Evan Ingram should Heath make the case for Evan Ingram?
He's a tight end, and a lot of the good ones are not playing this week. And there's no bigger gap for a tight end between non-PPR, half PPR, and full PPR rankings. But Evan Ingram basically catches 5 passes every week. He's going to give you 8.5 fantasy points as a floor, and that's without a touchdown. He absolutely has the role to produce one of these stupid 22-point days just out of nowhere because he happens to score a touchdown. Right. So he's pretty much a must start. There's not like Jonu's the only guy I think who was drafted behind him that I would start over him. We
just got a good question in the chat from Paul that I have struggled with in my rankings. And it's 2 guys that are getting opportunities but struggling with them. And so
Ingram.
Yep. So I like Otten slightly better than Ingram. But
and you guys both have them back to back, actually. Heath has Otten 1 spot ahead. Jamey has him 1 spot behind. But if it goes to half PPR, is it easily Otten over Ingram?
For me, it is. And to be honest, the tiebreaker is quarterback. One guy's got somebody I trust. One guy's got somebody I don't.
Half PPR, I would go Otten just barely over Ingram. I do think there's a pretty big difference in PPR. Like Otten is basically seeing 5 targets per game with Mike Evans. Ingram catches 5 passes per game. But Otten does have a much better chance of scoring a touchdown.
All right. Will Levis is a top 15 quarterback. Tony Pollard is a must start. Calvin Ridley is a top 24 wide receiver. Nick Westbrook-Akine is more of a number 3 wide receiver. So would you start Calvin Ridley or a Jets wide receiver?
Both Jets.
Both Jets.
Okay. Would you start Calvin Ridley or Jawan Jennings?
Ridley.
So I think this is one where the projections say Jennings, and I'm just kind of faking Ridley up there to just ahead of Jennings.
Okay. And Sit Chigokonkwo and the Titans DST is in play, but they're not in the top 12. The Jets are at the Dolphins. Tua Tagovailoa is our start of the game. Here's a useless stat of the start of the week. Sorry.
This is also the start of the game.
Yeah.
Well, I guess Devon Achane would probably be the start of the game.
Yeah, maybe.
Or
Here's a useless stat of the game for you. In the last 6 games since Tua has returned, Jalen Waddle is averaging 11.1 yards per target. Tyreek Hill is averaging 8.8. Jalen Waddle is averaging 14.4 yards per catch. Tyreek Hill is averaging 11.6. I just really wanted to tell you that. I'm not going to make any fantasy analysis off of it.
Gibbs had a Twitter thread earlier this week. Like it's all bad for Tyreek Hill when it comes to looking at advanced stats. It's a good matchup. Another guy who I'm just ranking much higher than I project. But if you wanted to make a case that Tyreek Hill is just not Tyreek Hill anymore, you could use almost any of the advanced stats that you would like to. He doesn't get the same first read target share. He's not doing the same with targets when he receives them. He had an awful game last week after an awful month, but garbage time and a deflected touchdown saved him. But it's the Jets, and I'm starting him too. He's at home.
It is so funny that we say this. It's the Jets. They give up the fewest fantasy points to wide receivers. We're not expecting as of now Sauce Gardner to play, but also just they haven't done it against. I've talked about this a lot. They don't do it against good receivers. They just had an easy schedule, and they stink. They just stink. However, they did pretty well against DK last week, right? And
I just don't think DK's right. I also don't think Geno Smith is at Tua's level.
Yeah, Geno's played poorly. Like I said, DK could have a better game. All right, so Tyreek Hill then is where is he in your rankings, guys?
Borderline top 12. I mean, there's, maybe you're starting Judy and Jacoby Myers over him.
24th. And
wow.
Yeah, I think he's 36th in the projections.
One thing I like for Hill, Heath, is that he has 5 end zone targets, 7 red zone targets in his last 4 games.
Are we counting the touchdown he caught last week as an end zone target?
It actually did.
That was not a Tyreek Hill target.
That's fair, but that's still 4 end zone targets in his last 4 games, which is good. He needs to score.
Yeah, I mean it's Dolphins at home. It's a defense that we think probably has quit, but he's not. I'm not sure he's Tyreek Hill anymore.
Do you have you had the numbers on Tua in terms of being the best quarterback the last 3 weeks? Do you have everybody for the last 3 weeks at the quarterback spot?
No, total but I could get that pretty quickly.
All right, give me the total points for quarterbacks the last 3 weeks.
All right, well, talk about something else for about 10 seconds.
The Jets receivers, Heath, because I'm struggling with these guys based on what they have and have not done. It felt like Garrett Wilson could have had a monster game last week because Aaron Rodgers just missed him. But he's obviously struggling, and Adams is getting targets. A lot of conversation about these guys coming back. What's their motivation in terms of Adams and Rodgers? Like, how do you feel about the Chiefs receivers?
The Jets receivers, I am ranking as number 2 wide receivers. Devontae Adams 1 spot ahead of Garrett Wilson. I agree. It's been a little fluky that Garrett Wilson's has been as bad as he's been. And I'm mostly just starting both of them everywhere.
Yeah. I just want to bring up a stat that I brought up yesterday when we talked about Garrett Wilson. The last 3 games have been particularly bad for him. The first 3 games with Rodgers and Adams were fine, but Rodgers, like all we need from Rodgers is for him to not be completely terrible. Because in his first 9 games of the year, he averaged 234 yards per game. his last 3 games, he's been at 151, 184, and 185. I'm not asking for a lot here, but just get me 215 passing yards or something like that. These guys get more than half the targets. So we just need him to not be awful. All right, your top quarterbacks over the last 3 weeks.
No, I just want the numbers. How many guys have been over 60 fantasy points in those 3 games?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13.
12.
13.
So Jonnu Smith would be a top 13 quarterback.
I believe he would be 11th.
Well, and if you're talking per game, Josh Allen and Bryce Young would both be over 20 per game.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 quarterbacks have scored 21 points, averaged 21.3 or more fantasy points.
Pretty incredible.
Yeah. All right. So start Jonnu Smith. Can I just say this about Jonnu Smith? He has had really easy matchups lately. Disclaimer: I'm starting Jonnu Smith, not even questioning it. He's had really easy matchups lately. The Jets actually have been pretty good against tight ends. And I looked, Travis Kelce had 3-game stretches like this each of the previous 2 seasons, and he slumped immediately afterwards. Just hard to do this. 3 straight games with more than 21 fantasy points.
So if he gets 12, is that a win or a loss?
It's a win.
Okay.
But what did he have the 3 games before? He had 6, 9.6, and 7.5.
Since Tyreek Hill returned, Jonnu Smith has a 21.5% target share.
Since Tua returned.
Yes, which is better than Tyreek Hill. It's like 50% better than Jalen Waddle. He is the number 1 option in the Dolphins passing game.
Jonnu Smith or David Njoku is the question here.
Jonnu.
Okay. All right.
There's only 2 tight ends I start over him this week. McBride and Bowers.
Breece Hall
is the only tight end I have had him.
Breece Hall or Tyreek Hill?
Oh boy. Battle of the bus. Jon Snow was good in that one. I would go with Tyreek and PPR.
It'd be Hall for me.
Hall's coming off a bad game, but he has 83 or more total yards in 5 of the last 6 games since Devontae Adams was acquired. That's pretty good. I mean, it's not amazing, but it's pretty damn good. Okay. And that's it for this game. Actually, Dolphins DST. Do we like them? Like Dolphins or Chiefs?
Dolphins.
I don't have any idea. I have the Dolphins 1 spot higher.
I think we have 3 games left. All right, maybe we'll save one.
Man, is it you wanted to make Jamey feel better about the last couple of Fridays?
I knew this was a long show. All right, we've got Las Vegas at Tampa Bay. So you could start Aiden O'Connell if you need to. They're facing a team that gives up the 2nd most points to quarterbacks, but he's not ranked as a starter.
I do think 2 of the more fascinating quarterbacks this week are Aiden O'Connell and Cooper Rush because their matchups are so good, but they are so untrustworthy.
Yeah. But I want to know why you like Alexander Madison. I'm sorry. Why you like Amir Abdullah?
So the Bucs are tied for their top 3 in most receptions allowed to running backs. And I did this with the Broncos. It almost worked out to similar numbers. So I raised it a little bit just because so it was 6.8 PPR points with just receiving totals alone for the Broncos. And they had done that 8 times. A running back had done that 8 times going into that game for Amir Abdullah. He was the 9th guy to do it with just receiving totals alone. The Bucs have allowed 10 running backs on the season to get 7 or more PPR points with just their receiving totals alone. So a slight bump up. It was actually 12 with at the 6.8 number. But you're getting that as a floor for a guy that's been so involved in the passing game lately. That's a pretty good place to start. So if Madison's out, because I don't think it's Amir White. If Madison's out, then Abdullah stays in his role in the passing game, and I think he could get that floor, as Heath told you. 8 could get you into the top 30. 10 could get you in the top 24. He's got 10 or more since the guy started getting hurt in 2 of 3 games.
In the projections, and I've ranked him a little lower than this, and after hearing that, I may just move him back up to where he's projected. I've got Amir Abdullah at RB23 ahead of the Jags, the Chiefs, Chubb, Gus, all those guys.
So he's actually, I have him ranked 24th right now. I have him behind Pacheco just because upside, I think, still favors Pacheco. But I have him ahead of Hubbard. I have him ahead of the Browns guys. I have him ahead of the Jaguars guys. I think, again, if this stays and they're probably chasing points on the road, then we could see a situation where Amir Abdullah is really involved in the passing.
The question I have, and it's it's about trends, and it's only been 2 games, but in the first game without White and Madison, Sincere McCormick played 10% of the offensive snaps. In the second game, he played 38% of the offensive snaps. Antonio Pierce has really talked him up, and YPC for life, McCormick's averaging 5.7 yards per carry, leads Raiders running backs by a long shot in avoid rate, in yards before contact per rush attempt, and yards after contact per rush attempt. So it might be that receiving work for Amir Abdullah could both be the ceiling and the floor, although he did have 10 rush attempts last week.
I will say this, and it depends on how you feel the game's going to go, because the run defense is obviously easier this week than it was last week. The Chiefs just let teams stay in games, and they were chasing points at one point in that game because they do what they do. They fall behind, as he said a few weeks ago. There will be a point in the game where they are down by a touchdown. So that's just what happens against the Chiefs. If they're behind against the Bucs, I don't think we see as much from McCormick. If you think they're going to be playing with the lead against the Bucs, then we'll see probably a lot of McCormick or a competitive game. So I think this is a chasing points, third, fourth quarter situation. Bucs have been on the road the last couple of weeks. They're back home. This is a, again, must win for them to lock up the division if they're going to distance themselves from the Falcons. So I like the Bucs a lot this week. I think we're going to see a lot of Abdullah.
Start Jacoby Myers for sure. Trey Tucker, don't start him, right?
He's a poor man's MVS.
Okay, so that tells you everything. Brock Bowers start. Baker Mayfield you guys have in your top 6. And Bucky Irving is a must start. So let's talk about the Bucs running backs, Heath, with and without Bucky Irving. Where's Rachaad White with and without Bucky Irving?
With Bucky Irving, he is right behind Amir Abdullah for me. I think RB24. Without, he would be pretty close to a must-start running back, probably closer to RB15. Sean Tucker with Bucky Irving is only inside of my top 48 running backs because there's 6 teams on a bye. Without Bucky Irving would probably be in that Nick Chubb. I'd probably start him over Gus Edwards and Nick Chubb because I do think there's a much better chance that Sean Tucker breaks one long run.
And you said top 15 for Rachaad White if Bucky Irving were out?
That's where I would be, yes.
Both those guys would be in my top 24 for Irving's out.
Okay. Mike Evans is a start. Any interest in, did Sterling Shepard crack your top 40?
No, he cracked the top 150, back-to-back games with 7 targets. But the best thing he did was celebrate Mike Evans' big touchdown catch last week.
He is 1 spot behind Trey Tucker. We had a question. Man, Matt just gets all his questions right. But I think this is a good one. He's like, is this the first year Mike Evans doesn't hit 1,000 yards or the next few weeks nuts? Then the number of yards per game he needs actually went down last week. So he needs about 95 yards per game. Baker Mayfield knows that, is tracking it, and said it's very important to the offense that Mike Evans gets that. So I would expect Mike Evans will have 100 yards receiving.
All right, Cade Otton or a Cowboys tight end?
Still Cade Otton, but that's partially due to when the games are being played because the Cowboys play Monday, and we may not know right up until game time. But matchup certainly favors Ferguson.
I would go with Ferguson if he's cleared, Schoonmaker if he's ruled out, but Cade Otton if neither.
And Cade Otton, by the way, the Raiders allow the 4th most fantasy points to tight ends. So now the Panthers were even worse, but it is a good matchup for him too. And the Bucs DST is close to top 12. They have been horrible this year, but they have faced a pretty tough schedule. This is a good matchup. Buffalo's at the Rams. Just an interesting stat. So I already told you about Khalil Shakir's ADOT, 3.9 yards, lowest among 91 receivers with 35 or more targets. But Khalil Shakir's target share in his last 5 games is 28.3%. His target per route run rate is 32.4%. Is that because Keon Coleman, Amari Cooper, and Dalton Kincaid have all missed time? I don't know, but he is getting more targets lately. So that's obviously a good thing.
He's the Evan Ingram of wide receivers.
That's a great way to put it. All right, so this game's easy. Josh Allen's a start. James Cook, I don't know how easy this game is, but let's get to the easy things. Josh Allen's easy. He's a start. James Cook is easy. He's a start. If you get a competitive game, you might actually get a lot of carries from James Cook. They've had so few competitive games this year. There's a lot of blowouts. Shakir is the number one receiver. Where's he ranked for you guys? Number one receiver for Buffalo. Where's he ranked for you guys?
26, 27.
Yeah, I think that's projects inside the top 20, ranks 25th.
And not going to start Coleman if he plays, or Cooper, right?
Would prefer not to. Coleman
will be a boom bust flex. He'll be in the top 40.
Thoughts on the Bills tight ends?
Oh boy, Kincaid's just tough to trust at this point if he plays. I like that he's limited, so if you want to pick him up just to see what happens over the next couple of weeks, and he gets maybe back into the flow of the offense and can start to produce at a higher level, but I would try to avoid both if you can. It's a great matchup, but still.
I would start him over Muth if he's active.
Yeah, we have a question. Kincaid.
I would start Fireman.
All right, so let's go to Matthew Stafford, because my other stat of the game was that Matthew Stafford really has not been very good in tough matchups, but since Kupp and actually I like this stat. So, well, first of all, answer this question: Stafford or Levis? From Michael here.
Levis.
I have Levis one spot higher.
All right, I like this stat because in the last 6 games of 2023, Matthew Stafford was on pace for 4,831 yards and 42 touchdowns. In his last 5 games, I believe, since Puka and Kupp returned, he's on pace for 4,500 yards, so about 330 less, 320 less, but also 40 touchdowns. And he is a top 12 quarterback per game in 6-point per passing touchdown leagues. He has not been good, though, in tough matchups this year. Had that garbage time touchdown against the Eagles to save him there. But the Bills give up the 4th fewest fantasy points to quarterback. So starter sit Matthew Stafford.
The Eagles game was punching Nakua, though, right?
No. That was the Minnesota game, I think. Kupp caught a garbage time touchdown very late.
Yeah, you're right. I'm sorry. Points. They still count, though.
No, that wasn't Minnesota. That was Miami? No, New England?
I don't Matthew Stafford's a QB2. I would rather start Will Levis. I'd rather start Jameis Winston.
Agreed.
Okay, start Kyron.
The plus is that the number you're seeing on the screen, 49.5. Like the Rams hopefully will do their part.
Start Puka, start Kupp. Any interest in DeMarcus Robinson?
No.
He is 1 spot ahead of Trey Tucker, 2 spots ahead of Sterling Shepard.
Sit the Rams tight ends, and the Bills DST is 6th for Jamey, 3rd for Heath, 9th for Dave. They haven't been very good against good offenses this year, unless you count San Francisco last week. But I hate DSTs this week, I got to say. All right, I'll save Cincinnati.
Go with the Saints.
What's that?
Just go with the team playing the JV offense.
Would love to go with the Saints. Not an option, unfortunately, in some leagues. I'm going to save Dallas and Cincinnati for tomorrow's show. That'll be
got 8 minutes till we hit our mark.
No, to your mark, baby. We already hit my mark 5 or 10 minutes ago. For Jamey and Heath, I'm Adam. For Thomas as well, thank you so much, and we'll talk to you tomorrow on Fantasy Football Today. Enjoy the game tonight. See ya.